Hi everyone, welcome to Techweek TV, brought to you by Callaghan Innovation. So delighted to have you joining us this afternoon. In this session, we are going to be exploring our innovation ecosystem with representatives as they share their views on business success in New Zealand and positive market exits, a topic that I'm personally super passionate about. So joining us, we have Vic Crone, CEO of Callaghan Innovation, Rosaline Nelson, Executive Leader at Callaghan Innovation, and John Scott, former COO at Navco, and from the end of the month is a new CEO at Invenco. Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good. We should say congratulations to John.
Oh, congratulations, John.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
We won't clap.
Tempted.
Okay, so just Vic, quickly from you, what does Callaghan Innovation do?
So we are here to do two things: activate innovation and accelerate the commercialization of your ideas. So essentially we're out there working with businesses and just kind of agitating or either really supporting the application of new technology into their businesses. And in New Zealand, we know if we can get our quite incredible ideas that we have around the country growing faster with hugely globally ambitious exporters, then that will do wonders for the future of our economy in many different ways, I'm sure we'll talk about.
Awesome, thanks. And so you guys recently commissioned a report looking at some of New Zealand's amazing success stories, including at least 9 unicorns since 2004. What else did the Growing the POE report reveal about some of our successes?
Yeah, well, it was where it really came from was there's a lot of debate around particularly exits in New Zealand. And what we were trying to understand was to talk to many of the founders who had exited and what they had done post-exit. And what we really learnt in that is that you kind of intuitively know this, but the facts and the information wasn't highly visible in the dialogue in New Zealand, is essentially that deploying that capital into new businesses or themselves starting new businesses. What we also see is that often the executive teams of exit companies are going out and creating new organisations. So there's this beautiful flow-through effect of capital being recycled, entrepreneurs who are now skilled in creating global businesses, investing in other businesses, opening up networks and investment networks to those businesses. So really that's what that was about. And there's a beautiful graphic in there around tracking Pete Meir. And all the activity that has come out of that, whereas potentially we're a little harsh on his exit. So I think the other one to mention is what comes through really strikingly for a number of our entrepreneurs who have exited is the philanthropic and social good that they provide back into communities. So, we'd love to see that as well.
And I guess the concern was that companies were selling offshore, but that those assets weren't really coming back to New Zealand. And what the report kind of says is actually it's being reinvested. We're getting spin-outs and second and third time founders, and then all of that money is sort of being reinvested, and then we've got our sort of follow-on ecosystem players as well.
That's exactly what the report shows is happening. And I think the other way that you can look at this is that we do come up with some incredible solutions to world problems, not just problems in New Zealand. However, because we're a very small country, we actually don't have the capital and the skills in the country, the management capability to grow global businesses to the end state they can get to. So in some ways it's a little selfish to hold it just to New Zealand when the potential in terms of the applications of solving problems for businesses and for people's lives, someone else can pick that up with the capital and run it even harder across the world. So that's another way to look at it.
And we should be sending as many of our ideas to the world as possible.
Yes.
John, I'm going to go to you because you're a good example of what we're talking about. So can you describe sort of like when Navman was sold and I guess what you've been working on since?
So Navman sold a couple of times while I was there, right? So I think it was 2003 and 2005, and I think the 2003 one when he sold to Brunswick or sold offshore was the one that got a lot of noise. But then once Brunswick, the American company, had it and sold it off again, I don't know how much noise that really got, right? Because I guess it had all gone offshore. But the first sale was, if you like, a sale of an appreciating asset, and the second sale was a depreciating asset. And so anyway, we picked up, or me and a bunch of the guys picked up the Navman Marine division, and then we rolled it into part of a larger private equity parlay out of Norway. And if you like, we were the littlest acquisition in their big roll-up of 7 or 8 brands. But because we had the infrastructure of Navman, actually most of the ERP systems, the development systems, the underlying code and everything of the fabric was all built on Navman. So, in fact, if you look sort of 15 years on from that, the only remaining execs who joined that are all the old Navman ones. I think I was actually probably one of the last ones out last week, but anyway.
Well done.
Yeah, but it's 15, 20 years, right? But just for some sort of scale, just the marine division of Navman that's spun out into Navico, its equity value now is 3 to 4 times larger than, Navman was sold for the second time, and 10 times larger than it was sold for the first time. So, you're almost talking... I think we worked out we'd probably be one of the top 40 companies in New Zealand if we were listed here. And you just don't even see that. It all just sits below the noise level. And you obviously go onto an international stage and it's still tiny.
Another great example of this, I caught up with Steve Newman, who's the CEO of eRoad, who also spun out of Navman the other day. And what I love about their story is they've got 200 staff on the North Shore of Auckland, building their products, exporting them to America. And Stephen's philosophy was, we did it with Navman, but I kind of want to see if I can do it again using the same methodology. And it's almost like a game to him, which is quite cool. Do you want to jump in, Rosalie?
Well, I was just going to say that I think what this really highlights is that so often we focus on the technology. And we can often think of technology, there's a perfect timing with technology, and if you keep it too long in the fridge, it's a bit like milk, it'll go off. So actually what we need to think about is how do we ensure that we give the opportunities for the people to be able to stay, to contribute in New Zealand, for the research and development resources to be able to stay and contribute in New Zealand. But the technology should be taken to the world. That's often the success story. So I just think that as a country, sometimes we just don't have the conversation in quite the right way.
Yeah, and I think just adding to that, what's really interesting is you look at what you've built, and then example with eRoad is you are creating for the economy high value jobs, and that's exactly what we need. So Paul Callahan said, we've got to turn it from a relatively low productivity economy through to a big one, which is companies exactly like this, creating high value jobs, which creates a stronger economy for New Zealand, which we will all ultimately benefit from.
Yeah, like if you just take the Navman one or the Navman into Navico, I think we had 400-ish people when I took it on, and then we obviously had to close the New Zealand factory, which was, it was a low point, right? But I think we lost 300 jobs, and then we went into the global economy and we went down to about 60 people. But we're up at about 180 people again. But, I think we have one person who's not university qualified in the whole joint.
Yeah.
And I think the wage, I know what the wage pull is, right? We're spending about $13, $14 million a year. And it's a 200 staff versus 400, but we're spending way, way more money.
On staff.
Yeah, way
that's
more.
Right.
So Rosalie, I'm going to come back to you. There's a stat that every dollar invested in the tech sector creates $3 worth of growth in the New Zealand economy. Why is investment in tech seen as providing more benefits than, say, other more traditional industries?
Look, there's really 3 reasons, and the first of those is that drive of productivity. New Zealand's productivity is about 20% behind the OECD average. It's been stubbornly low for a long period of time. So the more that you can drive productivity gain, the more you can actually drive living standards and wages. It's one of the reasons that we have a lower wage economy. The second part to it is that actually it's the smaller and the disruptive businesses that are the high growth ones that really drive our export opportunity, our high value jobs. These are known as being the frontier firms, to use sort of the economic language. Around the world, they are incredibly important because they set the pace, and then out of that you begin to create the clusters of adjacent opportunity that starts to emerge as well. And this is something that New Zealand so desperately needs, because in terms of our economic diversity, we are still so dependent on our primary production. And what we can see is that there is a lot of great ideas, a lot of great technology that's actually being developed. And if we look at global innovation benchmarks, we're really high on the inputs. We're about sort of, I think it's in the order of about 15th in the world, but we're well below 30th in the world for outputs. In other words, we are not converting all the great ideas and the technologies and the work that's coming out of universities in an effective way into commercial products that we can scale and take to the world. So there's a gap there, but it's also a fantastic opportunity for us.
What is, I know that Callahan is doing some work in this space. What is Callahan doing to make, or to help companies commercialise more, especially the technology coming out of universities, and then also our startups, moving them into scale-ups as well?
Look, this is our core focus. If we think about accelerating commercialisation, there's a number of things that we do. So the first of those is helping to provide the funding, but also the access to the scientists and grants for students to be able to go into businesses to help them with their R&D. So that's one of the factors around it. The second part is that right now we're in the process, I mean, a lot of people don't realise with Callahan, is that actually half of our staff are scientists and technologists working across the full range of backgrounds, data and IoT and advanced manufacturing, and their focus is helping companies to take that proven piece of research or a really sort of validated concept and to be able to take it through all of those stages into a scalable, market-ready product. But the other thing as well, that from a business perspective, you're not just thinking about how you develop the technology, you need to also build the capability. You need to know how to scale from 2 to 20 to 200. So we provide a lot of the advisory support as well as the programs that help businesses to actually grow and mature enough to be able to go to the rest of the world.
Can I take a thing of that productivity? Because so we have 13 R&D sites. So Mexico, America, Italy, St. Petersburg. And so if you go through all of them, which we do each year, and you like average out the wage pool for the high, the low, and then you add on costs, like because our on costs or like the social costs are so low here, we are at the same cost level as St. Petersburg.
Wow.
And people don't realise that. So like, I think we're across every country in the world pretty much, and we're number 2 on a cost base, and actually a little bit of that's to do with the Callahan grant because they give us a bit back. But you know, without it, we're probably 3. But either way, when you compare us to St. Petersburg, you sort of get a feel. But when you look at it at a productivity level of what we deliver, we're delivering at the same level as like Norway, America, or London. And like there's this sort of misconception or somehow we're disadvantaged, but like Navman, E-Road, Fusion, all of these companies, I think they consider the R&D asset or location of New Zealand one of the key strategic advantages. It's not, I don't think in any way it is considered a disadvantage, right? And like, I mean, I can speak for Navico especially, right? It is the core, like it's the only place in the whole company that can actually build a whole product from ground to market, yet all the other sites build on it. So like the in-market stuff, all the stuff you have to do with customer, where it needs to sit with the customer, but it's a way higher cost base, but they all leverage the New Zealand. Yeah. So like you hear the stuff that we're not, you know, we sit low on the productivity level, and I just don't see it. I guess when you get the whole New Zealand economy and you layer it all on top, but at a technology level, like I'm not afraid of anyone.
Yeah, I think you're a great example. So in regards to what we would love more of in New Zealand, which is, you know, essentially you're a multinational with R&D right across the world. So you're connected, and your New Zealand employees are totally connected into that global R&D. And when you kind of add that up, we just don't have enough. companies like you, big multinationals, who are here doing research and development. You're right, we absolutely can do it from our country. We are good at it. We do, I believe, need a plan for how we bring more skills in. We're hearing a lot from companies that one of the biggest issues that they're having is access to skilled people. Maybe you've got them all. But the other one to mention, I think, when we're talking about figures, is that the smart investment in R&D, which you've clearly been doing, the return on that is 8 to 10%. That's what the numbers tell us. What we see out of typical, business investment in other areas can be a lot lower than that. So there's lots of upside to doing it.
Something I do want to kind of jump on here is I think the NavMan and all of the spin-outs are a really interesting case studies. A lot of them are hardware and software components, whereas if you look at like the Xero ecosystem, for example, how is it different for an ecosystem that is producing a lot of companies, startups, like SaaS companies versus a sort of hardware companies that are doing their R&D?
Look, so like I say to the boys, actually, as soon as you start talking about hardware or software as companies, you've sort of lost it, because I think Navico would be considered a hardware company, but I think if you look at our ratio, it's probably 75% software to 25% hardware. But the competitor for the stickiness is in the hardware. Like no customer can go around us to get to the boat because we own the helm. But are we a software company? Absolutely. And like if you look, is Microsoft a software company? Absolutely. Yet they do all their hardware. Is Apple? So, like I know it affects your valuations because people like software companies, but software companies, it's a little bit old school, but I like the money that they generate, right? Like hardware generates lots of money, and like software companies sometimes, once they're mature, they actually generate cash, but they burn a lot of cash to getting to like a big state.
They do, and it is high risk. You burn cash fast to kind of get there, and I agree with you. I think the way I would kind of look at Xero is more the bold, ambitious ambition from the start. I said it twice because I think it is so bold that they were going to create, one of the world's kind of first leading platforms in the B2B small business space. So we'd seen platforms being created in consumer land and in corporate land. In that business space, we really hadn't seen a lot. So I think that was really interesting, and they absolutely cracked it. So last time I looked, 600 or 700 applications that connect into the platform. To your point, it makes it really sticky. It's a different type of sticky between software and hardware, but it makes it really, really sticky. And loads of New Zealand companies being able to step off the back of Xero's large, capital raises, which is investing in sales and marketing in lots of places to kind of just come off the back of that and grow as well.
It's also a good example.
Interesting model.
But all the hardware companies are trying to do the same with their environment. So like obviously know a little bit about Invenco, know a lot about eRoad, know a lot about Navico, and all of them are trying to open their back end either through like moving to Android so they can get more partners on, or whether they're just opening up their APIs through their cloud.
That's right.
Like the software guys and the hardware are all trying to do it because there's too many opportunities to do it yourself.
So, and it's a hard play, right? So I saw a fantastic, won't say who because it's under NDA, application of AI, IoT, kind of machine learning into a hardware organisation that have software as well. So exactly different industry than yours, and just a beautiful example of where we're going in the future, creating that platform. So we're going to have more and more plays coming through like that.
So, Vic, just back to you. In New Zealand, we do have an attitude and unfavourable headlines sometimes, and we know some of the downfalls of selling offshore, but what are some of the benefits for New Zealand, and why do entrepreneurs decide to sell in the first place?
Well, some of the big benefits some of the reasons is they've busted their guts for they've often spent a decade or more of their life working phenomenal hours, carrying a phenomenal amount of stress, And so, you know, an exit is a very valid way to say I've done everything I can, and someone else can take the reins, and they are handsomely rewarded for taking that idea, for creating all the jobs, etc., etc. So, you know, that is one. And then the flow-on benefits that we see into the Growing the POE report, in terms of the businesses that they then go and start and create, the networks that they open up for New Zealand. Many role models we have now. You know, that's a great thing about the number of large tech companies that we've got growing, and the few that have exited, is great role models for others to come in and follow. So thank you.
No, but all the boys, like if you look at
You got some girls there too, eh?
Oh, there is. Actually, I'm surrounded by them, but and it's way better than. But anyway, if you look at all the guys from Navman who when they cashed out, if you like they probably all thought they were going to take it easy. Yeah. But the type of people who do that and make that, I reckon they all went and worked harder.
Yeah.
Like the cash is obviously nice, right? But the access to equity and all of like large amounts of cash, right? Like Navman was growing at over 100% CAGR year in, year out, and like they were needing 150 million just to fund working capital for the next 6 months.
Last time I was chatting with Sir Peter, he was telling me that he was working on a bunch of stuff, but one of them was robots that would go to the fridge, get the beer, and then bring it back to the rest of the team, which I thought was quite cool. I was like, do you really need a robot for that? It's like, absolutely, you need to keep the brain going.
That's right.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. John, I just want to come to you for a bit, for the founders and entrepreneurs that are watching, who maybe are looking at what their future plans are. Is there a right time to sell, and how important is timing?
Okay, so there is obviously a right and a wrong time to sell, right? But it's a little bit, you normally discover that with hindsight. And it normally is directly proportional to whoever buys you. So, you know, like if your company's growing and you've got, you know, good headlines and all of that stuff, you obviously get a bigger multiple, and if it's going backwards, you get it. So in terms of a capital value, there's obviously a good and a, but I don't think that's, the real question is who you sell to. So like most of the guys who buy you, or buy you for the highest amount, have got a business case where they've got synergies or any of those other good management words to plug in, right? And you get the right one. Like Brunswick was a perfect example of like everything business-wise and everything it should have been awesome, right? Because the industry is actually still trying to do today what the vision was 15 years ago, and it still hasn't got there. And actually, if they'd done it, they would have won, because you know you still can't actually buy a boat like a car. And their vision was to make a boat that's like a car, and so in that regards, it was great. But then, from a cultural timing perspective, it's not that the Brunswick culture was bad or the Navico, it's just they didn't meet. So it didn't work for whatever reason. And so now in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best one. Like when you get into it, it was to do with the fact that Navman was actually a consumer company that needed to spend 10 to 15% on marketing, and Brunswick was a boat company that was used to spending 2 to 3. And it's sort of like oil and water, right? They were looking at us and we were looking at them, and then you add the Kiwi American thing, and it was like, right, this ain't going to work great. But you only know that with hindsight. So anyway, to answer your question, if you get the right buyer, you know, you can earn earnouts, and you know, sometimes 50% or 20% of a very big number is way better than 100% of a donut. And
well put.
Yes. So yeah, like I mean, the thing about that growing the pie thing that you don't like, if those guys had all of us guys had stayed in Navman, would it have been bigger? And that's the thing you can't work out, because it's the same guys, and like they all, like everyone knows everyone so tightly. Like, would that have been bigger? You don't know, right? And you're guessing. But if they could get access to the capital, I actually believe the thing probably would have been bigger. But you couldn't get it. So it's like
and that's part of the challenge.
And there you go. So I mean,
that was a good answer. There was lots of stuff in there.
Tick.
Piece of advice from you on some of the challenges that you faced.
Look.
Just one.
Yeah, one. So So when you start off, you sort of think that everyone knows what they're doing, and like the big discovery is no one does. Like you obviously got your best plans, but in the last 10 years used every like tier 1 consultancy, McKinsey, Bain, Boston, you name them, and not one of their plans is right on the first day. It's not even right on the end day, right? So this concept that everyone knows what they're doing, or there's somebody out there who's got it all dialed, once you realise that they don't, and everyone's sort of making it up, as you know, you've got to know the next 2 steps are right, but as long as 1 and 2 are right, you can sort of work 5 out further down the path. So, like, I get it all the time. People are like, what's the answer? But there is no answer, right? You just sort of got to be comfortable making it up as you go along, and then know that if you keep doing the right things, it actually it does turn out. And if you just be confident doing the same thing again and again.
And Vic and Rosalie, can you give me just your piece of advice for New Zealand companies watching this on the topic?
I was just loving his honesty. I was like, that's so awesome. Because it's very true that there is often no blueprint, no model. So, look, I would just say, I'm just going to say, think really ambitious and really global from day one. That's really where we would love to see more of New Zealand businesses play, so we can create more examples like this, and really start to shift our economy, as Rosalie said, from primary through to higher value. That's something we're really focused on.
Yeah, for me it would be ambition is one of the biggest challenges, and I think also a willingness to really partner and collaborate. And I think there's often a desire, but we know that there's real challenges because the system can be very fragmented. It can be hard to find the people that can help you at the right time. So I think don't be afraid of letting people see your baby, and if they tell you it's ugly, actually that's your opportunity to pivot and to actually do something beautiful.
And it should be, otherwise you've held on for too long.
Exactly.
Version 1, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. That's all we have time for. Before we sign off, Callaghan Innovation has launched its free online discovery platform, Scale Up New Zealand, a platform designed to get the best out of our innovation ecosystem and to showcase our innovation and companies to the world. The platform helps to foster connections that will help grow companies' talent and capital. Check out the video we're about to play, and you can visit scaleup.nz for more information. Thanks so much for tuning in.
If I had a mission statement for New Zealand, it would be a place where talent can thrive.